All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to get to it now. I want to talk about the Ukrainian woman that was stabbed on a train in flipping North Carolina, Charlotte, right? Ooh, Charlotte's in the news again. Ooh, you know, Ukrainian woman who fled war in home country fatally stabbed by homeless man on North Carolina train. Now, I want to give this article comes from the Post Millennial, and I picked it for a couple of reasons. Primarily because this reporting was out almost immediately after the stabbing. So the basic story is this hot young blonde chick, this Ukrainian woman who is apparently a refugee from Ukraine, and that's a whole can of worms that we're not even going to mess with this morning. Got on a train in Charlotte and was murdered. And when we say murdered, if you guys haven't seen the video, I may or may not play the clip a little bit later into the show, but Patrick touches on the real reason we're talking about this morning, and that's that nobody was talking about it. And I'll give it let's see, credit where it's due. Let me be a little fair. I didn't hear about this until it started trending on Twitter, and that's because it wasn't in the reporting at all. Nobody was reporting on it, right? With a very, very few exceptions. And to illustrate my point there, let me share this with you. Here is a search on DuckDuckGo this morning, right? Iryna Zarutska, right? This is a search this morning. What's going on today? And what do you see? 3 days ago, there's reporting, right? 2 days ago, New York Post, The Independent today, CNN yesterday, AP News 1 day ago, right? Oh, here we go. WBTV, August 28th, right? Deadly stab. And you see, we go down the list, and it's almost all 1 day ago, 2 days ago. Legacy, who I've never heard of. Okay, they reported on August 24th. That's pretty close. And then you get, keep going. 4 days ago. Okay, August 25th, there's one day ago. And you're seeing all the big names, Fox News 1 day ago. Like I said, up here, you saw the Independent, New York Post, CNN, all within the last day or two. But let me show you something interesting. If, as you know, you can set a custom date range. So I set a custom date range on the same search term, and you see up here, custom date range, August 22nd to the 25th. Because, like I pointed out just a second ago over here, right, you start seeing some, you get down here, and the first one you see that's not the last day or two is August 28th. This happened on August 22nd. And it's not that it wasn't reported on August 22nd. It's just that when we go back and look at the date range, August 22nd to the 25th, okay, you got the Legacy on the 24th, which we already pointed out, the Charlotte Observer on the 23rd, right? WBTV, I don't know who that is, but you got them on the 23rd. The Post Millennial is the article that I pulled up because that's the biggest name that we see reporting on it within 3 days of the incident. Call it a late incident on the 22nd, and we could call it 2 days, within 2 days of the reporting. City of Charlotte, WSOC, right? That sounds like a local outlet, right? So you've got a bunch of local outlets. You got a handful of local outlets in Charlotte that kind of covered it right after it happened. But then it was a media blackout. Why was it a media blackout? Well, I mean, why was it a media blackout? I'll tell you why it was a media blackout. This is why. This right here is why it was a media blackout. Because the narrative loves this guy and hates this woman. Because when it first happened, they didn't know that she was a precious Ukrainian refugee that they want to send all our tax money to. All they saw was white chick, right? All they saw was the sacred brown man and the evil white people. And they reported on it based on that. So we've... Sergeant Major points out, other than the bloody video, it was not an outstanding murder. I'm going to disagree with you there, old man, and here's why. Because this was a murder committed by a multiple repeat offender, a violent multiple repeat offender, who was back out on the street because judges want him to be there. Specifically, Democrats want him to be there. He was most recently released, with the judge justifying his release by saying, I shit you not, he wrote me a promissory note. He wrote me a letter, promised that he would change his ways and not do bad stuff anymore. Right? So for anybody who hasn't seen the video, like I said, I'm not going to play the video here for so many reasons. But there's the moment right there. There's the moment that it happened. This guy is literally sitting on the train, and the woman sat down in front of him. He pulls out a little penknife and just stabs her in the neck. And of course, initially only part of the video was released, because right after this, he stands up and the video catches him walking around on the train, chanting, I got the white bitch. I got the white girl. I got the white girl. Right? So this was a racially motivated attack committed by a member of the ethnic bloc that is responsible for the vast majority of all violent crime in this country. And it was swept under the rug. So, every life is precious. Every murder should be horrifying to all of us. And this one is not extraordinary. This one doesn't stand out because it's a murder. It stands out because this is one where it was obviously preventable. And it wasn't just not prevented, but the soft on crime. We say soft on crime. I'd like to try and work that particular phrase out of the lexicon, because the Democrat is not soft on crime. They are pro-crime. They are explicitly pro-crime. Because they're not interested in anything that solves problems that they can run on. They're in fact interested in anything that creates problems that they can continuously run on having not yet solved. As evidence to my point, I'd like to reference the where is it? I'm sorry, guys. I've got a lot of stuff pulled up to cover the story this morning. The Charlotte mayor, who I only have the quotes from a quote from. There we go. I only have quotes from in this article. I guess she gave a written statement. She didn't actually make a statement. But Lyle's statement about mental health services, which did not mention the suspect's reported criminal background, promoted anger as Democrats seek to push back against President Donald Trump's rhetoric to deploy the National Guard in major Democrat-run cities. This activity, hey, Coder Girl says, you know what? That's something that I wanted to get to in just a minute. Appreciate you, and I appreciate your comment. Don't be a stranger. Keep the comments coming. The mayor's comments on, basically, oh well, he needed health care, et cetera, et cetera. He needed mental health care. Listen, we've been trying to toot that horn for a while. If there was a gun involved here, that'd be the whole conversation. But it was a knife. And that makes the conversation a little different because, of course, if there was a gun involved here, then what we'd be hearing is, well, we need to take more measures to make sure that violent criminals can't get their hands on weapons. It's also a problem across the pond. The Brits just don't have guns the way we do. And so instead they have stabbings, mass stabbings. Criminals carry knives instead of guns. And that might sound preferable. Sergeant Major points out this was a small knife, and that's absolutely correct, right? It's not like he pulled out a samurai sword or a machete or something. A little penknife, right? Little pocket knife. I usually have at least 2 of those on my person when I'm out and about, just in case. And when I say just in case, I'm not talking about carrying a small knife for self-defense, right? I'm talking about just in case I encounter a shiny apple and I would like to consume it without getting the skin between my teeth by taking it in small slices, right? Or I encounter a pack of M&Ms that they forgot to perforate, and I don't want the corner off because it's hard to dump them in my mouth while I'm driving. So I want to cut the whole top off and have a nice open sleeve that I can eat my fucking M&Ms, right? You don't carry a small knife for self-defense. You carry a firearm. Now, the whole conversation to be had there about whether or not she should have had a firearm, I tend to think, yes, she should have a firearm, especially if she's going to be in a place where, frankly, they're actively working to keep criminals on the street. Because what the Democrat wants, right? I've covered this over and over again. I've made this point over and over again. On the left, they are not interested in getting anything that they say they want. Whether it's justice reform, whether it's abortion, whether it's gay marriage, etc. Anything that they want, anything that the politician and the voter says that they want to get through policy. What they mean is, we want to get this thing and cause harm to someone. Right? And that's insidious as hell. Right? Think about that for a minute. Because one of the things that they claim to want is unfettered access to government-funded infanticide. And I'm telling you, they do not just want free, unlimited abortion on tap. They don't want free, limited abortion on tap unless getting that also causes someone else harm. Like, for example, using legal mechanisms within the context of that argument to have pro-adoption and pro-responsible sex educational material removed from public places. And what does that have to do with it, with any of this? My point is, criminals are released in blue cities because the thing that they want is a high crime rate so that they can fundraise and run on, we have a problem and we are going to solve the problem. And it's amazing to me that when they run on solving the problem with a problem like crime, they put forward solutions that are inept, unintelligible. Right? You can look at Canada. Recently, we've seen a lot coming out of Canada about dealing with home invaders, and police chiefs coming out and saying, I think it was Steven Crowder that did this the other day. He played a couple of clips of these Canadians and then some clips of specifically Florida sheriffs, and the Canadian police, the Canadian law enforcement are saying, listen, I know people are breaking in your houses all over the place, but the right answer isn't to murder people. Okay, hold up. Wait a minute, right there. If you've just broken into my home, you're not getting murdered. Your death while you are armed and uninvited in my home is not murder. That is the defense of my precious children, my wife, and my property. Oh, and myself too. What do you know? Right? You come through the door with a weapon and die on the spot. I did not murder you. You chose a war you couldn't win. But what's the Canadian solution? They're telling people, listen, they're breaking into your house because they want to steal your car. So the best thing you can do is just make sure that you leave your key fob by the front door where they can find it easily. I don't want them to steal my car either, yo. Right? You'll hear him say, "Are you really trying to tell me that a little bit of property is worth somebody's life?" No. No, I'm telling you that I value my property, my family, and my safety over the life of absolutely, literally any and everyone who would compromise the security of that. Like, if I haven't made this clear, if the question is my property, the safety of my family, my wealth, my security, my capacity to provide for my family, for my children, for my wife, if it's between that and the entire population of the rest of the world, then all lives are forfeit. That's not even a question. When you come to the trolley problem and you say, okay, Lowry, your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is down this track, and literally every other living person is down this track, I will throw that switch every time. And every man should do the same. Why do we have monsters in our midst? Because we pretend like somehow it is immoral or unreasonable for every man, for every grown adult man, to do anything other than act in his own self-interest, enlightened self-interest, from which he can negotiate in good faith with other adult men who are also operating in their own enlightened self-interest to negotiate reasonable accommodations and commerce and trade with one another. When you get outside of that boundary, look, I do what I want to do, where I want to do it, on property that I own, and nothing that occurs in that context, assuming factors. This show is not about this episode is not about the outlier sociopath that's abusing his family, right? But what we do here, that's nobody's business. No, I mean, we're raising kids, we're homeschooling, we're raising chickens, we're growing some fruits and vegetables, clearing land to build an apiary and maybe get some honey out of it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're doing over here. Because I'm not even talking about, you mind your own business. If I want to smoke a little pot on my own property, but for real, if I wanted to, cut down all the trees on my property and grow, 1,000 pounds of marijuana, and it stays here, then that should be nobody else's business. Now, once you get out into the world, your rights stop at the end of your fist. The mayor here says that Brown, who has been arrested and faces a murder charge, had long struggled with mental health issues and looked likely to have suffered a crisis. Yeah, he suffered a crisis. He suffered a crisis of being human. So her entire commentary downplays the individual personal responsibility of the murderer. What do you think? If this was a white boy, a white homeless guy, and he just randomly murdered some black chick or some black dude on the subway like that, everything would be about, oh, he's a racist. He targeted them for their skin color, which we now know from the video that is exactly what happened with Brown. He said, hey, look at that. There's a little white girl. I'm gonna stab shit out of that. Yeah. And there are people asking whether or not he should get the death penalty. Okay. There's a whole argument about the death penalty and trusting the state with that much authority. And I have a hard time with some of those arguments. Because the fact is, I don't trust the state to have that much authority. And frankly, if I don't feel like I can trust the state to use the death penalty correctly, then the state should be abolished. That's I can't trust the state to positively and reasonably identify dangerous criminals. Then I can't trust them for anything. The state cannot be trusted. So, okay, I've gone off a bit down the rabbit hole. I've got a lot of clips pulled up that I wanted to get to. And frankly, we're not going to get to all of them too much. So let me bring this one up, and I'll kind of wrap on a conversation about this right here. So this is Jasmine Crockett. And this conversation comes up because there were no police officers there to defend Iryna. There was no armed man there to solve her problem. Now, if there had been a police officer there, I'll be fair. If or anybody, a lawfully armed civilian, look, I'll be fair. This guy just jumped up with no warning and murdered this girl. And if you've never been in a bad spot like that, I'll tell you, there is no time. Right? If you were sitting on the bus with your concealed carry, the first moment you see his arm go up and he's about to plunge that knife into her neck, as much as I'd love to see you put 6 in him and leave him on the ground, I promise you that in the time you reach, draw, aim, and fire, he's got that. It's fast. But I want to remind you that one of the big arguments that the gun grabbers, like Jasmine Crockett that we're about to get to, rely on is you don't need a firearm to protect yourself because that's what the police are for. That's the government's responsibility, and you should trust the government to protect you. And we've talked about Castle Rock. We've talked about Gonzalez, the Supreme Court decisions where the Supreme Court, in more than one case, has very clearly stated the police do not have a duty to defend you. They do not have a legal responsibility to intervene and stop the commission of a crime. Their only job is to investigate crimes which have already occurred, and, let's be real, to collect revenue from otherwise law-abiding citizens over minor traffic infractions. Right? I want to be a back the blue guy. I do. But outside of tiny little communities like mine, the police just are not Andy Griffith. They're not good faith actors who are expected to protect and serve. Right? And like I've said before, we should be filing class action lawsuits for conspiracy to defraud the public against every police force out there that still has the words protect and serve on any of their paraphernalia. If you hear a cop say protect and serve, that's a liar. He might believe that of himself and of what he wants his job to be, but legally it is not the case. Well, here's Jasmine Crockett, and she's getting lambasted. You're going to love this. I'm about to say something in Jasmine Crockett's defense because she's being lambasted over her statements in this video. But listen to what she said.
I want to be clear that, law enforcement isn't to prevent crime. Law enforcement solves crime, okay? That is what they're supposed to do. They are supposed to solve crimes, not necessarily prevent them from happening, per se.
She's right. As I just explained, she's right. So let me be very clear about what that means. If you are disarmed, if you do not have the Second Amendment, if you do not wear a firearm at all times, or have close access to one, right? Okay, fair play. I'm a big boy, so I take my gun off when I'm sitting at my desk, but because I'm more comfortable that way. But it's within reach, right? If you're not armed and ready to engage in the use of lethal force when it is necessary for your safety and security, there is nothing. You do not have security. You are not safe unless you do it yourself. Now, another thing we talk about often on this show is the connection between rights and responsibilities. The reason you have the Second Amendment, we talk about, you don't need 30 rounds to hunt deer. Okay, you need more. If you think that, you need to have more kids. Because you ain't hungry enough. But the idea that it's just for hunting, for sport, right? That's easily dismissed when we look at the founding documents and come to understand that it is also for a defense against an overgrown government, a dangerous, authoritarian, tyrannical government we want to retain to ourselves, the people. Just like the 10th Amendment says, if it's not an authority enumerated to the federal government, then it is retained to the people. It's retained to the state and to the people. One of the key rights and responsibilities and authorities that is retained to the people in that, quote, nebulous penumbra of unenumerated rights that's retained by the 10th Amendment to the people is the right and authority to abolish the government and establish new government. And quite frankly, the more I look, the more I see, the more I understand of the government we have, the more I think it is very clear that it has become destructive to the ends of liberty, of prosperity, of justice. And perhaps it is time to seek to water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants and patriots alike. Okay, I'm getting maudlin. I'm going to have to go ahead and put a pin in it there before I get too far on down that rabbit hole. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.